We begin with the countdown to July 21st, the deadline agreed upon by Canada and the United States to come to a trade deal. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand said today that she believes that timeframe is still within reach.
This is an effort that we are putting all our weight behind. It is necessary for the health of our economy. I will say that we are still hopeful that an agreement can be achieved indeed.
The path to a possible deal is riddled with uncertainty. And on top of tariffs, U.S. President Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill leaves some big unanswered questions about the future of electric vehicles in Canada. Signing the bill into law last week, Trump almost completely repealed all tax incentives for electric vehicles in the United States, raising concerns about what that could mean for the industry and for EV incentives and battery production in Canada. Vic Fedeli, he is Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, and he joins me now. Minister Fedeli, it's good to see you again, sir. Thanks for being here.
Great to see you, David. Thank you very much.
I wonder if we could start with the state of the battery production agenda here in Ontario. You know, your government, the federal government, you've got about $30 billion committed in production subsidies and other subsidies. And some of those are all dependent on the U.S. keeping their subsidies in place. Those were changed to some degree in the legislation this week. What does it mean for the projects here?
So we've told all of the companies, what the Premier announced very early, as soon as Donald Trump was elected and began talking about repealing the IRA and the subsidies, we've told them all Ontario is 100% in with the subsidies that, with the investments, as we call them, that we agreed to in the first place. With or without the IRA, you can count on Ontario. We want those jobs and we want those companies here.
Okay, so those stay in place even though they were contingent on the IRA remaining in place? Like, that's in the letter of the contract based on the conversations I've had with federal ministers and I think with you in the past, Minister. So even though you don't have to do the production subsidies, Ontario's going to do them to keep the projects alive?
Look, we went into this business to save the 100,000 auto workers whose jobs were in jeopardy in 2018. We've come out of it saving those 100,000 jobs, adding more than 10,000 jobs today, and tens of thousands will come in the future as these plants are built. And so we have said to those companies who all asked that very serious question, what is Ontario going to do? The Premier was very vocal on day one. We intend to honor every one of those investments.
Well, it's a shared risk between the Government of Ontario and the Government of Canada. Do you know, as one of the partners, whether the Government of Canada plans to honor those subsidies, even though it did seek the downside protection, right? That if U.S. policy changed, it wasn't on the hook. Do you know if they're going to continue to live up to their share of these subsidies?
You know, when the Premier announced that we would continue, we didn't hear any negativity from the feds. In fact, I would say, it's a great question to ask them, but, we think we're both all in on these investments. It's $46 billion worth of new business we've attracted to Ontario in that sector. EV sales were up about 25% globally last year. In all new sectors, there's going to be challenges, of course, but we think this is a great industry to be in and to be investing in for the long term of Ontario. Again, there were 100,000 jobs at risk in the internal combustion engine vehicles in 2018 and 2019.
Yeah, and look, to be clear, I have asked the federal government this question. I haven't gotten an answer yet. So if you're watching, federal government, please, you've got my email. So on that, Minister, this was to take advantage of an industry that sales were growing as a share of automobile sales, and it was to match the jolt of economic activity the Joe Biden Inflation Reduction Act gave the sector in the United States. Things are very different now, right? The sales mandate is coming in, but the subsidies at the federal level have gone away, though there's some talk of replacement. They've been eliminated entirely by Donald Trump, or will be later this year, and I don't think the president will be bringing in a replacement for that. Are you worried about the economic underpinnings of this, about the big investment you're sticking with in the battery production side, if the sales of the vehicles are not going to have sort of the incentives that have been there when all of this started?
Well, these are multi-billion-dollar companies making multi-billion-dollar decisions, just as we are as well. And we know the direction that it's headed. Again, EV sales were up 25% last year alone. Things are unsettled at the moment. There's no question. With Donald Trump and the tariffs, there's a chill on business that we're working through here in Ontario. We are preparing our economy for anything that comes from Donald Trump.
When I spoke with Minister Champagne about the effect of the trade disruption, the assault on the auto sector because of the president's tariffs, and what that meant for these battery production plants in St. Thomas and in Windsor, he said they were still a go. He said they were delayed but not dead. What's your sense of it, and what does delayed mean? When do you think you'll actually see these projects move into the real construction and then production phase?
Well, in Windsor, the plant has already opened their phase 1. Their phase 2 looks to be in the fall. Honda said they're putting a pause for 2 years. And these are important business decisions. And part of the reasons why we're keeping our investments where they were, we're showing the world exactly what Ontario is. As we travel, as the Premier's instructions to me are begin traveling more east-west than north-south and look for sales. Our message is very strong. Ontario, rule of law, stable, predictable, all of the things that you want to hear in business. A reliable partner who does what they say they're going to do. And I think that's really important. And that's why we were able to land not only the $46 billion in auto, but about $70 billion in new businesses. We've landed, some of the stats are, we've landed in the last 2 years, 184 companies from around the world, invested $30 billion here in Ontario, and hired 18,000 people. That's the FDI that we've landed here, primarily in the manufacturing sector. So we've got a robust economy, but with like everything under these tariffs, there's issues. We put $30 billion worth of firepower is set aside to help these companies, whether it's tax relief. Those are all of the things that we're putting in place.
Well, you've made collectively with the federal government this bet of $30-odd billion, right, on battery production facilities. The 20% mandate that all new vehicle sales must be electric is supposed to go up to 20% effective next year. There's been a push from the manufacturers to move away from that. What's the view of the government of Ontario on whether or not the federal government should do this? Because obviously, for your investments to work out, you want EV sales to be a thing, but should they move off that number?
Well, we think the feds should do exactly what we're doing, and that is to listen to the automakers. They're the ones who also have, our share is a small share of the hundreds of billions that they're investing. Listen to the customer. That's what Premier Ford always does and always says. So listen to the auto industry and hear what they have to say about a way forward. Who knows best about the auto sector than them?
Just two points I want to get through, if I can, Minister, in the time we have left. One is the countdown to this July 21st deadline. And I know, it's impossible to read the mind of the president, and the prime minister is keeping the details of the negotiations tightly held. But what is your sense of how likely some sort of resolution is by this July 21st deadline? Are you optimistic? Is the government of Ontario thinking we're moving towards a deal, or are you as in the dark as we are?
Well, the negotiations are completely in the hands of the federal government, who, as you said, are keeping their cards close to their chest. But we are prepared for any eventuality. $30 billion worth of firepower. We've been traveling literally around the world over and over and over. I mentioned the success we've had in the last 2 years with 184 companies. We've had a couple of good weeks. A few weeks ago, we were in Japan. 4 days, $400 billion worth of business that we'll be announcing. We were in Italy to say thank you to Ferraro for their almost $500 million investment in Ontario, 500 new jobs in Brantford. So we are preparing for every eventuality with the firepower that we've put aside.
Okay, so hope for the best, prepare for the worst. It sounds like the posture you're adopting, and
we're preparing for all eventualities.
All eventualities, right? So on trade as well, switching just as a quick final point to the internal trade dynamic, because I know you've been part of the conversations about knocking down internal trade barriers, and I know Ontario's signing MOUs on this, at least trying to be one of the pace cars, probably along with Nova Scotia on it. Are you as optimistic? Because coming out of Quebec City, there was some, we're going to look at these things, but we need to consider implications, and the yeah buts are starting to enter this conversation. And we've seen some criticism of the value of the internal trade discussion from groups like the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, saying it's been a little bit overstated. What's your sense of where things are?
Oh, this is absolutely spectacular. This is something that people will be looking back in 50 years and thinking that was the moment. They met the moment. $200 billion in increased GDP. It's the StatsCan, Deloitte, the Banks of Canada, Trevor Tombe, Ryan Minutia, all the people that are involved in analyzing this. They all come up with the same number of 200 billion. Everything you buy costs about 14.5% more money because of transportation irregularities that we have, or differences, I should say, that we have in each province. Now got mutual recognition coming, and that means if it's good enough for you, the good that you're selling in Nova Scotia, it's good enough for us. We know it's different, but we'll treat it as equivalent. We've got labor mobility. If you're an architect in Manitoba, you can come to Ontario and start work Monday morning. You got 6 months to get your paperwork done, but you can do that. And direct to consumer alcohol. These are, if you enjoy your Prince Edward County wine and you're from Saskatchewan and you took a case home with you and you want another case, you don't have to show up there to buy it anymore. You can have it shipped direct to the consumer. This is big dollars that is available now across the entire country. I mean, just think. Well, I'll end by saying European Union, 27 countries. They don't have free trade issues. They just cross the borders. 50 U.S. states. They don't even know what we're talking about interprovincial trade. They think, don't you already trade amongst yourselves? If you can't do that.
Right. All right. Well, Vic Fedeli, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time today. That's Vic Fedeli, Ontario's Minister of Economic Development. Good to see you, sir.